The courtroom smelled like sweat, cheap cologne, and victory. Not guilty. 2 words. That's all it took. The moment the judge dropped the gavel, the air inside that room shifted. The tension, the anticipation, the thinly veiled anger from the prosecution, all of it evaporated in an instant, replaced by the smug satisfaction radiating from 5 men in crisp blue uniforms. Detective David Royce was the first to crack a grin, his chubby fingers smoothing down the lapels of his jacket like he'd just won an award. His partner, Jimmy Cross, let out a slow whistle, shaking his head as if the entire thing had been nothing more than an inconvenience. Lance Wilkes, the tallest of the group, stretched his arms behind his head, looking about as concerned as a man deciding between 2 brands of whiskey. Rob Milton chuckled under his breath, nudging Brian Cox, the youngest in the squad, who still looked a little pale despite their win. "See? What'd I tell you?" Royce muttered, his voice slick with confidence. "Ain't nothing a good lawyer and a tight story can't fix." The charges: corruption, evidence tampering, misconduct. Big words for a case that was never going to stick. Not when you had the right people in the right places, and they did. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like flies on a summer barbecue. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved in their faces. "Detective Cross, do you have a comment on the trial's outcome? Do you believe justice was served today?" Jimmy slipped on his aviators, flashing the same cocky grin that got him out of worse situations than this. "Justice? Lady, justice put on a blindfold and took a nap years ago." Lance laughed, draping an arm over Royce's shoulder. "Come on, let's get out of here. Feels like a damn circus." As they moved toward the parking lot, Royce noticed him. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark suit pressed so perfectly it looked painted on. He was just standing there, watching them, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Not a reporter, not a protester, just watching. Royce narrowed his eyes. "You lost, pal?" The man didn't blink, didn't move, just gave a slow, knowing smile before turning and walking away. Royce scoffed, shaking his head. Some people need a damn hobby. No one gave it another thought. They should have. The bar was loud, filled with the clink of glasses and the low hum of conversations overlapping. Royce, Cross, Wilkes, Milton, and Cox sat in their usual corner, drinks in hand, celebrating like kings after a victorious battle. "I gotta say," Lance leaned back, smirking, "I almost thought we'd be in real trouble for a minute." Royce snorted. "That's your problem, Wilkes. You worry too much." Cox took a sip of his drink, still not as loose as the others. "You really think this is over?" Jimmy gave him a look. "Kid, this was over before it started." Just then, Cross's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, saw the name on the screen, and his smirk dropped. "Chief Reynolds." He hit the speaker. "Cross," he answered, his voice still relaxed but with an edge of curiosity. "Listen up," the chief's voice came through, tight, serious. "I need you all to hear this." The bar noise faded into the background. The others leaned in. "We've got a situation." Lance raised an eyebrow. "What kind of situation?" Reynolds took a breath. "Captain Phillips is out. Effective immediately." A pause, then... "What?" Royce sat up straight, his grin gone. "City Hall made the call. He's done. New captain takes over tomorrow morning." Another beat of silence. Then Jimmy scoffed. "So? We'll break him in like the last one." Reynolds didn't laugh. "I wouldn't count on that." Something about his tone made the hair on Royce's arm stand up. "Who the hell is it?" The line went dead quiet for a second too long. Then Reynolds spoke. "Marcus Bryant." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Cox's fingers went white around his glass. Lance set his drink down, carefully, like it might explode. Royce swallowed. His throat felt dry. "You're joking." "I wish I was," Reynolds said flatly. Jimmy let out a low curse. "The hell is this? Some kind of stunt?" Reynolds exhaled sharply. "This is very real. He takes over at 9 a.m. Be there. Be ready." Click. Call ended. The bar wasn't loud anymore. Not for them. Royce's hands curled into fists. "This is bad." Cox looked between them. "Who is this guy?" No one answered right away. Then Rob finally muttered, "You remember that guy outside the courthouse?" Silence. The man in the suit. The one just watching. Jimmy exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "No, no way. Lance let out a nervous laugh, but it sounded forced. "This is a joke, right?" Nobody laughed, because it wasn't a joke. And for the first time in a long, long time, they weren't the ones in control anymore. Royce hadn't slept. None of them had. By the time morning rolled around, the usual routine, waking up, throwing on the uniform, grabbing coffee, felt off, like someone had moved everything an inch to the left while they weren't looking. Royce pulled into the station, parked his car, and just sat there, staring at the building. It had always been his castle, a place where rules were suggestions and consequences were for other people. Not anymore. Not since him. When he finally stepped inside, the atmosphere had changed. The usual easygoing, loudmouth chatter of the morning shift was gone. Officers moved like ghosts, whispering in corners, glancing toward the captain's office like it was a tomb. Royce spotted Cross, Wilkes, Milton, and Cox gathered near the coffee machine. None of them were talking, just standing there, staring. He followed their gaze. The office door was open, and inside Marcus Bryant sat at the captain's desk. He wasn't reading files. He wasn't making small talk. He was just sitting there, fingers steepled, eyes locked on the hallway like he was waiting for someone to step out of line. Royce clenched his jaw. He wasn't going to be intimidated, not by him. With a quick glance at the others, he squared his shoulders and marched straight into the office, not bothering to knock. Bryant's eyes met his instantly, like he expected this. "Captain," Royce said, his voice just a little too tight. "Figured I'd introduce myself." Bryant didn't blink, didn't smile, just motioned to the chair across from him. "Sit." Royce hesitated for half a second before dropping into the seat. Bryant leaned back, his gaze never wavering. "You've been here a long time, Detective Royce. 17 years, right?" Royce forced a smirk. "Guess someone did their homework." Bryant nodded. "Oh, I did a lot more than that." The way he said it, that was a warning. Royce's smirk faltered, but he held his ground. "Look, Captain, I get it. New guy comes in, wants to shake things up, make a name for himself, but around here we—" Bryant leaned forward, just enough to cut him off. "You're under the impression that I need to make a name for myself up," he said smoothly. "That's your first mistake." Silence. Royce shifted in his seat. "All I'm saying is—" "Your second mistake," Bryant continued, "is assuming that this department still operates the way it used to." He reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the desk. Royce glanced at it. Thick. Too thick. He didn't open it. Bryant smiled. "Go on. Take a look." Royce hesitated before flipping it open, and his stomach dropped. Inside were documents, statements, photos, his cases, his mistakes, his cover-ups, every bad arrest, every falsified report, every conveniently misplaced piece of evidence. It was all there. Royce forced a laugh. "This is a joke, right?" Bryant tilted his head. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Royce swallowed hard. His hands had started to sweat. "You don't just walk in here and throw around accusations, Captain," he said carefully. This department," Bryant interrupted, voice like a blade, "is done playing by your rules." Another silence. Then Bryant leaned back again, folding his hands. "Here's what's going to happen. You and your little crew, you're going to do your jobs. You're going to play it straight. No more missing evidence. No more convenient technicalities." Royce's pulse hammered in his ears. "And if we don't?" Bryant's smile was slow, cold. "Then I burn this department down, and you go with it." For the first time in his entire career, Royce felt something foreign slither into his chest. Fear. Bryant stood. The conversation was over. Royce left the office, his hands clenched into fists. He could feel Cross, Wilkes, Milton, and Cox watching him, waiting for an answer. All he could do was walk past them. Because for the first time ever, they weren't untouchable. Royce didn't like feeling powerless. Scratch that. He hated it. For 17 years, he had been the one pulling the strings, making the calls, and bending the rules when it suited him. The system had always worked for him, never against him. But now it felt like the whole damn world had flipped upside down. And the worst part? Nobody was saying it out loud, but everyone felt it. Bryant wasn't like the other captains. He wasn't the type to slap you on the wrist and tell you to be more careful. He wasn't the type to play along. No, this guy was different, and Royce knew it. By the time the day was over, the weight of that conversation in Bryant's office was still pressing down on his chest. It wasn't just about the folder full of dirt on him and the others. It was about how easily Bryant had thrown it on the table, like he'd been waiting for this moment, like he had planned for it. And that was a problem. So naturally, the only reasonable thing to do was to drink about it. The five of them met up at their usual bar, a quiet spot, with dim lighting and strong pours. Nobody said much at first. Just silence and whiskey. Until Jimmy finally exhaled through his nose and muttered, "All right, someone say it." Royce didn't answer. Neither did Wilkes or Milton. Cox was the one who broke. "We're screwed." "Shut up, Cox," Royce snapped. But the kid wasn't wrong. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink. "So what's the move, boss? 'Cause right now, feels like we're just waiting to get buried." Royce clenched his jaw. "He's testing us," Wilkes scoffed. "Feels more like he's hunting us." Royce shot him a look. "Then we don't give him a reason to pull the trigger." That was the plan. That was the only plan. Keep their heads down. Lay low. Let Bryant find a new target. And for a moment, they almost convinced themselves that might work. Until Royce stepped outside and saw his car. It was parked exactly where he had left it. Nothing broken, nothing stolen. But the entire thing was covered in red paint. Not splattered, not messy. Precise. Like someone had taken their time. Like someone wanted him to see it. And on the hood, in thick, dripping letters, was a single word. "Ready?" The whiskey turned sour in his stomach. His hand instinctively reached for his gun, even though he knew nobody would be standing there. Cox stepped outside behind him and froze. "Oh, wow." Jimmy let out a low whistle. "That's dramatic." Wilkes crossed his arms. "Guess we know who sent the message." Royce's jaw was so tight it could have cracked. "That son of a—" "Careful." The voice wasn't one of theirs. Royce turned. And there he was. Bryant. Standing on the sidewalk like he'd just taken a casual stroll, hands in his pockets, calm as ever. Royce felt something crawl up his spine. "You think this is funny?" Bryant tilted his head. "Funny? No. Predictable? Absolutely." Jimmy stepped forward. "What the hell do you want?" Bryant took his time before answering. "Just making sure you're paying attention." Royce clenched his fists. "You listen to me, you smug." Bryant held up a hand. And Royce shut up. Not because he wanted to, not because he was scared, but because for the first time in his entire career he wasn't sure what his next move was supposed to be. Bryant leaned in just enough for his voice to drop. "You think you can play the same games you've always played? You think this is still your town?" He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind that said, "I already know how this ends." Then he took a step back, adjusted his jacket, and left. No threats, no warnings, just the quiet certainty that the walls were closing in. Royce watched him go, his pulse hammering. Wilkes exhaled sharply. Well, that escalated quickly. Nobody laughed, because for the first time it wasn't funny anymore. Royce had been in tough spots before. A bad bust gone sideways, a bribe that didn't land right, a witness who wouldn't shut up. But this was different. This wasn't just some internal affairs guy breathing down his neck, looking for a slap on the wrist scandal. This wasn't some rookie journalist with a recorder and too much ambition. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing. And worse, he was winning. For the last 2 days, the station had felt wrong. Like an engine running just a little too hot, about to overheat. Cops who used to slap Royce on the back now barely made eye contact. Conversation stopped the second he walked into a room. And Bryant? Bryant was everywhere. He didn't yell. He didn't throw weight around. He didn't make a scene. He just watched. And that was worse than anything else. Royce wasn't an idiot. He knew how this worked. A guy like Bryant didn't come in unless someone up high wanted a cleanup job. And cleanup jobs only ended one way. So Royce did the only thing he could do. He fought back. Not in the open. He wasn't stupid. He just did what he'd always done. Pulled strings. Called in favors. Made sure the right people got nervous. By the time Friday rolled around, he was feeling pretty good about it until he walked into the station and saw the FBI. They weren't wearing tactical gear. No bulletproof vests. No drawn weapons. Just 3 suits standing in the middle of the precinct, flipping through folders like they owned the place. And at the center of it all, Bryant. standing next to a very familiar folder open on a desk. The same folder he'd shown Royce days ago. Except now, it wasn't just for show. Something cold slithered into Royce's chest. He turned to leave, but a voice stopped him. "Detective Royce." Bryant's voice, calm, final. Royce turned, forced a smirk. "Captain," Bryant motioned to the desk. "You recognize this?" Royce shrugged. "Looks like paperwork. You want me to start filling it out?" One of the FBI agents, a short, no-nonsense guy with the kind of expression that said he'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it, spoke up. "We don't need you to fill it out. We just need you to come with us." Royce laughed. "You're kidding." Bryant smiled. "I never kid." Silence. Jimmy, Wilkes, Milton, and Cox stood frozen across the room, watching. They knew. And Royce? Royce felt something crack inside him. "Don't do this," he muttered. Bryant tilted his head. "Do what?" Royce's jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists. "You think this ends with me?" Bryant stepped closer, lowered his voice. "Oh, Royce," he murmured just loud enough for him to hear. "This doesn't end with you. It starts with you." Then he stepped back. "Take him." The FBI agents moved. Handcuffs snapped around Royce's wrists before he could blink. And just like that, it was over. As they led him past his crew, Jimmy looked at him, eyes wide, breath shaky. "Royce!" But Royce didn't say anything. Because there was nothing left to say. The last thing he saw before the door shut behind him? Bryant, standing tall, watching. Checkmate.